Shop, episode 190, 6 Tips for Better Scheduling. Well, hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Keys to the Shop, where we give you insights, inspiration, and the tools you need to grow as a coffee service professional. My name is Chris DeFiorio. I'm your host for the show. Hope you've been having a really good week, and I'm excited to talk to you today about scheduling as one of the most important factors in your coffee bar's success. And hopefully some of the things that we discussed today are going to be helpful for you and maybe give you some different ways to look at this process that can be one of the most stressful things that we do. But also one of the most rewarding. So looking forward to discussing that with you. Now, if you have not yet subscribed to Keys to the Shop, I would encourage you to do so that you don't miss out on any of the episodes. You'll be updated automatically. Just click the subscribe button. And if you have the opportunity to rate or review this show on iTunes, that would mean the world to me also. It's so encouraging to see the reviews, and the more of those we get on that site, the more we get recognized and the more people find the content. So thanks very much to those of you who have already done that. Today's episode is brought to you by Prima Coffee. Prima Coffee is one of the world's best specialty coffee equipment suppliers, and their passion is to curate the best coffee equipment from all over the world and fit it with the needs of their customers. So you're looking to outfit a coffee bar with equipment or upgrade your existing equipment. They have the grinders, brewers, espresso machines that you need, as well as things like under-counter refrigeration, sinks, that end of the equipment spectrum as well. So they have you covered on all bases. And not only that, when you go to the website on the learning page, you'll see a ton of resources in video and blog form that helps you wrap your head around the equipment, use it well, and introduces you to great ways of making coffee. And Prima Coffee is just about helping you succeed in making great coffee. And that's what I love about them. Now, they have an amazing offer for Keys to the Shop listeners going on right now till January 31st. If you go to this website, prima-coffee.com/keys, that's prima-coffee.com/keys. When you check out, you can use the code HOLIDAY5, that's the word holiday and the number 5, and when you do so, you'll get 5% off your order. There are some restrictions that do apply, but 5% off your order when you go to prima-coffee.com/keys, and that's a really awesome offer. I definitely would take advantage of that if I were you. So again, that's prima-coffee.com/keys and the code HOLIDAY5. This episode is also brought to you by the people who are leading the way in awesome plant-based performance beverages, and that is none other than Pacific Foods with their Pacific Barista Series. The Barista Series is just an amazing product, developed for and by professional baristas and the standards of excellence that they have for what they serve their guests. You could choose any of the selections within the Barista Series line, coconut, almond, rice, soy, oat. And whatever you end up selecting, you can rest assured that you're using a product that will not only take the heat from steaming, but it'll also deliver an amazing silky texture and produce a flavor in the beverage that is balanced with the coffee. So it keeps so it's not an overwhelming flavor. It keeps the flavor balance focused on the star of the show, the coffee. So that's really important, and that's very much on purpose. They put a lot of care into developing these for the coffee industry, and they are just huge supporters of specialty coffee. These products are an amazing testimony to that fact. I would encourage you to get these in your store. Try them out for yourself. Let the taste be the deciding factor. Let their performance be the deciding factor. Let your customers try it. Let your staff try it. I think you're going to be impressed. Follow the link in the show notes to find out more information and get these products in your store and see how they can elevate the plant-based offerings in your cafe. Okay, so today we are going to be talking about scheduling, and scheduling is one of the things that I am passionate about, and the reason I'm passionate about it is because, well, I mean, I've spent 20 years in specialty coffee, and in that time, you are going to experience both good and bad scheduling. And if you're in specialty coffee that long, you're probably going to be in a management position of some kind. So chances are you've done a great schedule or you've made a terrible schedule. So I have been on all different sides of this equation. whether I'm receiving a schedule from a manager who is stressed and not able to produce a great schedule for whatever reason, or, I have a wonderful manager who's very much on top of things, or I'm the person who is, knocking it out of the park, which thankfully I've been, but unfortunately, and, this happens to everybody, you're the person who has to deal with the fallout from having a bad schedule, something that's put together hastily, and the fallout from a bad schedule is something that maybe the most powerful thing in the cafe that erodes trust in leadership, outside of not paying people on time, which is like the number one thing that you can do to erode trust in the barista base in your coffee shop. So I am really passionate, like I said, about this, and I hope that some of the things that we talk about here are going to help you, because they are things gleaned from experience on both ends of the equation. So the first thing I want to mention about scheduling is that we've got to have a mindset that this is one of the most critical areas to demonstrate our care for the staff. And I know we're big on showing care to people. We want to care for the customer and care for our staff. A lot of times we use verbiage, but we don't use actions. We don't become better managers, or we don't become better owners. And that's the reason why we see so much turnover, is because of, leadership that's dropping the ball in lots of different areas. And many times it's the most basic areas. Scheduling is one of the most, I'm not going to say basic, but it's a fundamental area of what makes your coffee shop run. And I'm not going to say basic because it is a very complex thing. There are a lot of restrictions that you have in terms of people's time and availability, and it's deeply connected to the hiring process. And so let's not pretend that scheduling is easy. That's why we're doing an episode about it, is because it's not easy. And there are some things that you need to know going into it that I think will help make it a little bit easier. The first thing is, you cannot rush a schedule into existence. And the first thing is, again, having a mindset that this is one of the primary areas of care. It's the love language of every barista everywhere, is to have a well-done schedule that's consistent and communicated well, all of those great things. So when you get in that headspace, you're going to give yourself a little bit more focused time, and to make sure that you're going to do it right. Putting the schedule together haphazardly while you're working a bar shift, between doing drinks, or in your car before you jump into a shift or go home after a shift, these are the types of things that can get you in trouble. And so I guess that's the first thing that I would recommend to you, is give yourself the space and time to take it very seriously. The kind of space that you give yourself to do taxes. You want to get that right because you really only want to do it once. So don't try to get it done in a piecemeal fashion. Every schedule that you put together represents an outline for the life of the cafe for that week or series of weeks. That's a huge, huge thing. And you need to give it the time that it deserves. And you can't really see all of the angles when you are stressed out and trying to rush it. And believe me, there's a lot of angles to see. When we're talking about the angles, we're talking about things like availability, blackout dates, like baristas not wanting to work on a particular day because of an event, and they've already told you about that, and you schedule them anyway. And everyone who's done a schedule has had this happen, where you've got to scramble and beg one of the baristas that has a little bit of time left over to cover that shift, because that other person is committed already. They went through the proper channels to get that taken care of, but you didn't go through the proper channels to make sure that you were taking care of that. It's just reciprocal. If we're going to expect employees to follow the principles of scheduling that we set up, then we need to be able to give it the time that it deserves to honor their adhering to those policies, right? So that's the first thing. Give yourself space, and I think you're going to find it's going to uncover a lot of things that might not have been uncovered if you had less attention and were stressed in the process. Which brings me to my second tip for scheduling. And maybe it could have been the first, but this is not really chronological. I always recommend to my clients that you have a standard operating procedure for scheduling. This is not the same as how to schedule people, but how the people who you're scheduling should interact with the schedule. What are the procedures for requesting time off? Is it 2 weeks advance notice? Is it 1 week? I can't prescribe that for you. You've got to determine what kind of lead time you need, but you do need lead time. And you need to communicate it very well to people in a document that lets them know, here are the things that we have, sort of put up in place to, give some order to this unruly beast of scheduling. And it can be unruly because everybody wants the most ideal shift. Everyone wants to go to see that band. Everyone wants to go to see their family. And then during the holidays, you know very well right now that you might not have the schedule you want because maybe you've dropped the ball in terms of getting people to put their requests in, or you don't have a policy. And so it's just like first come, first serve for time off for the holidays. But you do need to have something in place that allows people to know how to put in for time off, how to get shift coverage. They need to be able to access their schedule really well. And this is easily done today more than ever. It used to be that you would post something on a piece of paper on the refrigerator, and that was the schedule, and it would be edited via Sharpie. But now we have all sorts of things like when to work or when I work or Schedule Fly. I really enjoy Schedule Fly. And these are some of many options that we have for communication hubs that deserve their own document. And then we need to teach people how to use it, how to interact with the schedule so that when you sit down as the manager, you've got all this in front of you. You've got all of their blackout dates. You've got all of their availability. And you've also got the ability to see who's trying to trade what shift and how and when. That's really important because sometimes people don't realize they're going to go into overtime. And so there needs to be kind of a central hub, and attached to that is a standard operating procedure for how to interact with that. So that's tip number 2. Really get your standard operating procedure in place for scheduling and requests for time off, and have a central hub for all of this to take place. That is not a piece of paper. And I would even say it should be a specialized scheduling app or website, because this is a really important thing. And just like I said on tip number 1, you need to devote time and energy to the schedule. I think space and resource needs to be devoted to the schedule too. That's why I recommend specialized products to help you really nail this, because you can't afford to drop the ball with something like your schedule. And now the third tip is one of the reasons why scheduling is such a huge deal, and that is labor cost. Every time you're putting people down on a day to do a 6 to 8 hour shift, you are spending money. That person is going to be there working and in drawing a paycheck. And you better believe that, if you just don't give any guidance to your managers, or if you yourself are just kind of haphazard with this, you're going to end up with a lot of labor cost wasted, because you'll have 3-person shifts where there shouldn't be 3 people. And then consequently, you won't have as many people to work on the busy times, and you only have 2 people. So you have this bored, overstaffed shift, and then you've got a 2-person shift that really should be 3 people. And how you determine that is how seriously you pay attention to your sales history and the flow of business in the cafe and the workflow requirements of your cafe. So labor cost and paying attention to how much money you're spending every time you put somebody's name down is critical. So you need to have the average amount of money that your cafe is making per day available to you, and determine based on what your labor costs are in your cafe that you want to shoot for, which is ideally like 25 to 30% or lower depending on your area. You might want to, I've worked in cafes where the ideal is like 21%. and it worked just fine. So you need those numbers in front of you. What are we expected to make on a Wednesday? How many people do we have scheduled? What's the projected labor for that day? And then tweak it from there. But don't go in blind and just put people in place and think that just because you filled in some spaces with names that you've done a schedule. Too many times, especially first-time managers, will do a schedule like that and then be called onto the mat by the owner for spending a lot of money on labor. You can't really fault somebody if they haven't been, coached into a particular skill, like scheduling with the budget in mind. So have those metrics available and schedule like you're spending the precious resources that are the lifeblood of your cafe, because you are. Now that brings us to tip number 4, which is you've got to schedule your people according to the business that you're going to get, or that you historically know you're going to get. And what I really am driving at here is you've got to be realistic in what you can expect your people to do. I really am kind of thinking about the shifts where you're trying to save money. Maybe you're super conscious about your labor cost and you're really trying to get it. If the standard is 25%, maybe if I can get my labor down to 18%, we'll make even more profit. And then you schedule fewer people. You even have like one person on shift in the swing shift in the afternoon or something between the close and the open, and then they get slammed. I'll tell you what, that's maybe the first person that's going to leave your organization because they don't like being made to look stupid by scheduling snafus like that. And the customers also, they're not going to come back, or they're going to feel like they are just walking on eggshells, and they're going to give pity tips to the barista because they see that they're just not equipped to do the job well. And this comes from a mindset of unrealistic expectations of staff, mostly toward the end of understaffed environments. Now, again, overstaffed can happen and does a lot. That is demoralizing also because when it's slower, you don't feel useful, you're not getting to use your skills, and the tips are worse when that happens. And that's why the schedule needs to be matched up with the business and the reality of the business as well. Be realistic. What's going to happen behind the bar at these times? Are you setting people up for success, or are you trying to just wring a little bit more profit out and shooting yourself in the foot in the long run? And people lose their businesses because of mindsets like that and not paying attention to the needs of the business and also the needs of the staff to be equipped well to do their job. So on to number 5, you really need to be able to schedule in advance. In scheduling in advance means 3, even 4 weeks in advance. Now, I know that sounds really ambitious, and in some ways it is, especially if you're the type of organization who is just putting out fires all the time, and it's all you can do to get the schedule out 4 days before it actually starts. That is really crazy making in my experience. And this is coming from both ends of the experience, mind you. But there is nothing more glorious than knowing when you're working so you can actually plan your life. That's not just for the baristas, but that's a huge, huge thing. It's also for the managers. It's also for the owner to know ahead of time who's going to be there to brew that Cambro for that customer, to know ahead of time that you've got those shifts covered. And, based on your policy of scheduling, you know how people are going to get last minute coverage, but at least you know that this is handled for 3 weeks. Man, and once you put a schedule out in an environment like that, you don't want to ever go back to, paycheck to paycheck style scheduling. And it's hard to pull out of that tailspin, though. Once you're in there, you've got to sort of burn everything to the ground. You got to take drastic action as a team. And oftentimes it requires the owner to step in and say, look, put the brakes on. Let's take hours to get our first 3 weeks in advance schedule and get it done. And then make that the standard. People do it all the time, even a month in advance, in organizations larger than yours. I guarantee it. It's not a matter of if it can be done. It's a matter of how much do you value the feeling of certainty, low stress, energized staff base. How much do you value your experience in the cafe or the customer's experience in the cafe? The more you value those things, the more likely you are to embrace a 3 to 4 week in advance schedule. So from me to you, make it happen. Make the 3 to 4 week in advance schedule happen, no matter what it takes. And I guarantee you're going to see people breathe a sigh of relief, and you will too. Now, the sixth and final tip that I have for you here is one that is a little bit trickier to navigate. This is tied really closely with the hiring process and how well you know your team. Go back into some episodes. I'll link in the show notes to these on one-on-ones, on communication and setting up ways of communicating with your staff so that you can get to know them. We have guests that have talked about strengths and finding the strengths of your team. Lisa Cummings was on the show talking about Strengths Finder assessment and working through strengths. Link to that in the show notes as well. But scheduling according to personality is one of the secret weapons to harmony in the cafe. We schedule things in the cafe according to, a senior versus junior barista. But what we don't really see a lot of is scheduling according to personality. And what I mean is this. You've got to make sure that the baristas you schedule together are actually going to get along together. You've got to make sure that not only do they get along together, but they complement each other. Maybe you've got a barista who's really fantastic on the register, really fantastic in hospitality-related things. And you've got another barista who's also good at that, but really thrives in the technical aspects of the work, on the espresso machine or on, making sure the checklists get accomplished. That's a good team to pair up because they cover all the bases of your cafe. If you've got two really chatty people on the same shift who love to talk to each other and the guest, then they're not going to be talking to that checklist. They're not going to be executing the details as well as a well-balanced team will. Now, I can hear you saying it right now, and I'm saying it to myself too. That's ideal, and I wish I could do that. Now, I know that you can't do that for every shift, but when you start doing it where you can, in seeking it out, you're going to start doing that also in your hiring. And that's why this comes back to hiring. We talked with the owners of the Mud House in St. Louis, Missouri, about this in a Founder Friday episode. They really are concerned when they're hiring people about how well those people get along with the existing team. That's really critical. That's a great insight that they shared in that episode. We'll link to that one in the show notes as well. But you need to make sure, but in the schedule, when you're thinking about, okay, there's going to be a ton of business on Saturday morning. We need 3 people who are going to get along well, who are also going to execute the job well and show hospitality. When you put 3 names down, do you see all those bases covered? If not, see how you can make it happen. And of course, again, you might not be able to do this for all of the days. That's a hiring issue maybe, okay? And that means that maybe somebody is out of whack. That means that maybe somebody's out of sync with the vision and the values of your organization, or maybe you haven't really hired well and communicated that vision well. Whatever the reason, choose the most critical times and start there. Start with the weekend rush or the Monday morning rush, whatever it is for your shop, and see how well you can get that balanced. And then get a taste for how it feels, and then expand it to the other days as much as you possibly can. That way, you'll get all the work done that you need to get done. You can be at home and not in the cafe and not worrying about whether or not the staff are handling the rush well. You'll know that these are high performers and they complement one another and they're proficient in their work in all of the relevant areas. And that gives you, as a manager, a lot of clarity and a lot more room and margin to advance things in the cafe rather than constantly putting out fires. So with that sixth one, that kind of rounds out the whole of these tips. There's going to be more things that we could talk about in scheduling, and maybe we'll bring some of those up on a shift break episode in the future. But suffice it to say, they all kind of fit over the umbrella of taking the schedule seriously, like an art. It is an art. It is it's a craft. I take making coffee seriously. I want somebody who buys a cappuccino from me to experience the best possible version of that beverage as I can make in that moment with the tools that I have. And I think that the same should go for the schedule. And the same should, because you're creating an environment by putting a name down on Tuesday morning and Tuesday night, and you look at the finished work, you can kind of predict whether or not it's going to be a good week. And my goal with this episode is to give you some things that will help you craft that schedule into something that increasingly over time will become a more finely crafted thing than a haphazardly thrown together functional thing. Let's elevate ourselves to, in specialty coffee, to specialty schedules, if you will. And I hope that this episode has been helpful for you in that regard. So, of course, the show notes are available to you in the description of this show. The recommended episodes that I mentioned in this episode are going to be linked there. And I would also recommend that you sign up for the email list for Keys to the Shop. If you go to keystotheshop.com and go to the contact page, you will be able to sign up for the email list where I send you the transcript from every episode, along with some bonus materials and sometimes some bonus audio and interviews from guests on the show. And that's as easy as just filling out a little bit of information. And every week you'll receive that. And that's meant to give you a little bit more resource to help these things, these ideas, stick and make a difference in your career and in your business. Now, speaking of making a difference in your business and your career, Keys to the Shop Consulting is available to help you improve your operations and the quality of your cafe, and also to help you gain clarity in your business and in your career. If you want to reach out to me and explore what that might look like for your situation, you can do so by emailing chris@keystotheshop.com. Also, please do email me if you have questions or comments, feedback about this show. Always love hearing from Keys to the Shop listeners. And that is it for today's show, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me and for being listeners to this show. We are coming up on 3 years of Keys to the Shop, coming up in the first week of January. So, it's just kind of flown by. And I'm so thrilled and honored to have been able to serve you all in this capacity, and looking forward to 3 more years. So again, thank you so much. And as always, I hope that this episode has truly given you keys to the shop.